I want to tell you about a doctor. She went to medical school because she wanted to help people. Spent 8 years training, passing boards, did residency. Genuinely good at her job. Genuinely cares about patients who walk through the door. Spends 8 minutes with each of them on average. Not because she's callous. Not because medicine stopped mattering to her somewhere along the way. Because the billing system she works inside pays her for volume. The more patients she sees, the more the practice bills. The more the practice bills, the more it survives. The more it survives, the more she has a job. She did not design the system. She did not choose it. She works inside it every day, producing an outcome that nobody who knows her would associate with who she is. 8 minutes per patient. That feeling you have right now, that low-grade frustration at the system, at a system that seems to produce outcomes no reasonable person would design, is the feeling that this episode is about. Here's what most people do with that feeling. They look for someone to blame. The doctor doesn't care enough. The hospital is corrupt. The insurance company is evil. The politicians are bought. And maybe some, if not, maybe some of those are true, or at least partially true. But the question that actually matters is the one that will change how you read every institution you ever encounter. What does the system reward? Not what does it claim to reward, not what the people inside it believe they're working towards. What does its actual incentive structure select for? Because here is what I've learned. Just from studying financial systems, from watching institutions, from reading history, with more certainty than almost anything else, systems produce the behavior they reward. Every time, without exception, always, every time. Not usually, always. Let me show you what I mean. In 2016, Wells Fargo was fined $185 million. At the time, it was one of the largest consumer fraud settlements in banking history. I mean, there have been bigger ones since, but at that time. The reason for this is that the employees had opened approximately 3.5 million fraudulent accounts. Accounts customers never asked for, never authorized, never knew existed. The immediate reaction from most people, these employees were criminals. But here's what the investigation actually found. Wells Fargo management had set aggressive cross-selling targets. The metric was, I believe, 8 products per customer, like credit cards, checking accounts, saving accounts, loans. 8. It was called the GREAT Initiative. Employees who hit the targets were rewarded. Employees who missed them were fired. The targets were mathematically impossible to hit through legitimate sales. The employees knew this. They also knew what happened to people who missed them. So to keep their jobs, they opened accounts. Not because they were uniquely corrupt, not because Wells Fargo had hired an army of fraudulent individuals who somehow passed background checks. Because the system made fraud rational. The executives who designed the incentive structure, who built the system that could only produce its targets through illegal means, paid no criminal penalties. Clawbacks were contested in courts for years. The CEO resigned with a $130 million retirement package. The system produced the behavior it rewarded. The people who suffered the consequences were the ones the system put in an impossible position, not the ones who designed the impossibility. That's not an aberration. That's how systems work. Another example, because I want this to stop feeling like a story about banking and start feeling like a description of the world. Think about teachers. I never met a teacher who went into education because they wanted to drill children on standardized test formats. Every teacher I have ever known went into it because they believed in learning. In the moment when something clicks for a kid, the light bulb turns on and struggle turns into triumph. Just something. Just the long-term impact of someone who really teaches. The No Child Left Behind Act that was passed in 2001 tied school funding to standardized test performance. Schools that didn't hit test score targets lost money. The ones that struggled lost money. That doesn't make any sense. Teachers in those schools, the ones who cared most, who stayed, who showed up anyway, spent the next decade teaching to the test. The system was rewarded for test scores. It produced test scores. The collateral damage was everything else. Critical thinking, curiosity, the kind of learning that doesn't fit on a multiple choice answer sheet. The teachers didn't stop caring. The system stopped rewarding what they cared about. Let's think about the pharmaceutical industry and the research they do. Drug companies are rewarded for drugs that treat chronic conditions. A patient who takes a pill every day for 30 years is worth way more in lifetime revenue than a patient who's cured once. The initiative structure does not reward for cures. It rewards for management. This doesn't mean pharmaceutical researchers don't want to cure diseases. Many of them went into research specifically to do just that, but the system funds the research that fits its reward structure. And the reward structure selects for management, not cure. Think about social media. The platforms are rewarded for time on the platform. More ads means more money, more revenue. The algorithm's only job is to keep you there longer. The algorithm learned through billions of data points that outrage, fear, and just general tribal conflict kept people engaged longer than anything else. Not because the engineers wanted to radicalize anyone, but because the system was rewarded for engagement, and outrage delivered engagement more reliably than anything else. Nobody chose this outcome. The system produced it. This is not a new problem. This is as old as organized human activity. 1971, the same year Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. I mean, we'll get more into that in a few episodes, but at that time, a social psychologist named Philip Zimbardo set up an experiment at the Stanford University that became one of the most infamous and most disturbing in the history of psychology. He took 24 ordinary college students, randomly assigned half of them to be guards and half to be prisoners in a simulated prison in the basement of the psychology building at Stanford. The study was supposed to run 2 weeks. He shut it down after 6 days. 6 days. The students assigned as guards had begun psychologically abusing the prisoners. Sleep deprivation, humiliation, arbitrary punishment. The ones assigned as prisoners have broken down, become passive, stopped asserting themselves. Neither group was selected for cruelty or weakness. They were randomly assigned. What changed their behavior was not their character. It was the role the system gave them and the power structure that role created. His conclusion? We overestimate the power of character and dramatically underestimate the power of situation. In 2004, there was a prison scandal. I don't remember the name. It was Abu Ghraib or something like that. 2004, ordinary soldiers, specific institutional environment, documented atrocities, not monsters. A system that created the conditions for the monstrous behavior and then blame the individuals when the behaviors appeared. Think about therapists. They go in to help people. They go in to help the less fortunate. But then they find out that there's a ton of paperwork and they're getting paid less than if they just only cater to people that can afford $120 an hour, and now they're not even helping the people they set out to help. It's the damn system. The lesson is not that people don't have agency. They do. The lesson is that systems shape behavior with a force that most people never account for, because we are trained from childhood to explain everything through character rather than structure. It's easiest to find a villain. It's more accurate to find the incentive. Here is exactly how this works. Every system has 3 levers: what rewards it, what punishes it, and what ignores it. Human behavior almost universally, almost automatically sorts itself according to those 3 levers: character, values, and intention operate within that sorting. They don't override it. The doctor with 8 minutes isn't ignoring her values. She's exercising them inside the narrow space the system's reward structure leaves her. She stays late. She calls patients back. She does what she can inside the margin, but the system determines the shape of that margin. This is why the most important question you can ask about any institution, any employer, any government agency, any hospital, any school, any media company is not what do they say their mission is? It's what does the system actually reward? Because the mission statement is what they want you to believe. The incentive, and they could match, but it's the incentive structure that really is what is actually produced. And here's where it becomes personal. Not just an observation about the world, but a tool you can use. When an institution produces an outcome that seems inexplicable, when a company behaves in a way that seems to contradict its own interests, when a government program produces the opposite of its stated goal, when smart people keep making the same apparently irrational decisions, the answer is almost always in the incentive structure. Find what the system rewards. The behavior will follow. Systems produce the behavior they reward every time, without exception. So what do you do with this? First, stop blaming people for system outputs. It's not about excusing bad behavior. People make choices, and those choices have consequences. But when an entire category of people and an entire institution is producing the same bad outcomes, when every doctor is rushed, when every teacher is teaching to the test, when every bank employee is cross-selling products customers don't need, I hate going to my bank just because I know I'm about to have to tell them no on some stuff they're trying to sell me. Like, no, leave me alone. When all this is happening, the explanation is structural, not personal. Treating it as personal means you'll never fix the actual problem. Second, develop what I call incentive vision. Before you accept a job, ask, what does this company actually measure and reward? What does the job description say? What gets people promoted here at this specific place? What gets people fired? What behavior do the incentives select for at scale? Before you take out a loan, ask, what does this financial institution get rewarded for? It's not likely your financial health. Before you consume a piece of media, ask, what does this platform get rewarded for? It's not for your accurate understanding of the world, most likely. The answers to those questions tell you more about what you're actually dealing with than any amount of brand messaging or stated values ever will. And third, when you find yourself inside a system that's rewarding a behavior that conflicts with your values, and you will, because most systems do, you have 3 options. You can comply and become the system. You can resist and pay the price. Or you can find the margin, the space within the system where your values can still operate and work in it deliberately, while building towards something outside the system that doesn't require you to compromise. Most people never consciously make this choice. They drift into compliance because the incentive structure is relentless, and the cost of resistance is immediate and visible. Knowing you have a choice is the beginning of making one. Systems produce the behavior they reward every time, without exception. In episode 1, we named the problem. There's an education you were never given, a class nobody offered. And the gaps in that education are not random. They're the predictable output of a system that was rewarded for producing something other than your understanding. That was episode 1. This is episode 2. And the idea that I'd like you to carry out of this episode, the one that will keep working for you for the rest of your life, is this. You're not surrounded by incompetent people and corrupt institutions. You're surrounded by systems. Systems with incentive structures that produce behavior. Behavior that looks personal when it's actually structural. Once you see it this way, you stop being surprised. You stop being naive. You stop wasting energy blaming individuals for outcomes that the system was always going to produce, regardless of which individuals were inside of it. That's not cynicism, that's clarity. And clarity is the beginning of every good decision you'll make from here.